Hey, what's up, guys? I want to welcome you back to another episode of the New Rule Podcast. It's your boy Adrian here, and I am joined for round two, our girl Breezy. Breezy, what's happening?
Things are going well. Happy to be here as always.
It's amazing, man. First episode, Breeze on. What's shocking? No, I shouldn't say shocking. It's what it is.
Shocking.
No, I should say it's shocking. It's the fact of, man, we got a lot of likes, a lot of reshares, and things like that.
I just had
man.
to fulfill my role here. Just kidding.
I feel like I'm over here, man. I've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. You know what I'm saying? Our producer Grady and Bree, man, y'all make it work. I'm over here, I'm just on the grind. I'm like the Dennis Rodman, you know what I'm saying? Just the dirty work. But no, it's been cool just seeing the love that we've been getting in the New Rules community. And hey, today, here's the thing. We don't, we do things on the pod. We want to be really authentic, as we always say. And so not every episode we're going to do the same thing. So normally, we have aired out. We're like, man, we really don't have it aired out, this week. So what we want to do is this. It's like we really want to encourage you that if you are, if you're watching on, if you're listening, if you watch on YouTube, Instagram, is to do us a favor, man. Just make sure that you share. Like if you're on Instagram and you see one of the reels come across or you see one of the videos, man, share it to your story. That would be awesome. Tag me in there. Tag Bree in it. We would love that. Again, we're going to have all of our social media stuff in the show notes if you're listening to it on a podcast. But we want to spread this stuff out. If you feel like the podcast is helpful, man, share it with a friend. Let them know. Man, please give us feedback as well. Please, we would love to have feedback. We'd love for you to give us a review on iTunes or wherever, you do your reviews. If you have an Android, I don't know how you do your reviews, but again, hopefully you get to the 21st century at some point, so that bummy phone. But anyway, all that being said, we're going to jump into the pod today. And so, Bree, what are we going to be talking about today?
Today, our title is Made for War.
Wow. We are coming at it. This idea, made for war, it's been a thought that I've been having a lot lately because you hear a ton in our country today about people saying, man, like, we're talking about peace, right? Again, you think about Russia, Ukraine right now, or in our country, it's very divided right now. I mean, a lot of, even though we're not in 2024 yet, but we're starting to ramp up with presidential hopefuls in the Republican Party, and is Joe Biden going to run again or whoever, and different laws. We live in Florida, so it's always a hot, spicy political place. And so people are very divided, and everyone's saying, man, why can't we get along? Why can't we just have peace? And here's the thing. What I truly believe is I believe individuals have to learn to work to find peace, to find harmony. I actually believe our presupposition is to make war. It's to be divisive. And I know that's not in today's world, that's going to be a popular thought, but it is. I think human beings we're not naturally made to make peace, but we're actually made to make war. And so I think when you can start to understand what the problem is, then I think you can start making some changes.
Why do you think that we're made to make war?
Well, I think human beings, that if you really look at it, we're always been we're divisive. I mean, just think about this. Here's like a funny one, but it's always us versus them. Right now, the World Baseball World Championships is on. And I saw a tweet the other day that was freaking so true. He was like, man, this dude said, America, I don't really get down with America a lot, but when it's the World Cup, when it's the World Baseball Championships or the Olympics, he's like, I'm like 1986 Hulk Hogan. You know what I'm saying? If you know anything about 86 Hogan, he was the flag, the red, white, and blue. But again, it's what? But when those things are over with, man, it's us versus them. You know what I'm saying? Republicans, Democrats, you know what I'm saying? Gators, Seminoles, whatever. And I'm joking about that, but it really is. Human beings, naturally, we are divisive people. But what we've been taught is no, we're not. It's the environment, it's the media, it's our parenting, it's our neighborhoods, it's all these things. And I don't say that those things don't play a part into sometimes the divisiveness, but I think people don't ever look within to say, what is in me that actually likes to make war? Why am I divisive? Why am I always getting spicy on Facebook or Twitter or stuff like that? Why am I that way? We never look at that because it's so easy to always just blame everybody else for what's actually happening.
Yeah. I think a lot of people right now would probably blame the government for a lot of the divisiveness, especially that we see within our nation. Do you think that they play a role within that?
100%. But what's the government made up of?
Humans.
There it is. They're made up of humans. So it's not like all of a sudden it's just like the government and it's just like this body of just people that are up there or just some random robots or something. No, there are human beings that are in government. There are politicians. And yes, you know what? But I will say they are some of the biggest ones. As much as they talk about we want to bring harmony and unity to the United States, Dude, no, they don't. You want what you want. And what has happened now is that it's politically advantageous for you to just be divisive even more. So what's happening now, who we really are, can just really play out way more on the mainstream. But I absolutely believe government has a part to play in this. Leaders have a part to play in this because they have a platform. But leaders are humans. And humans, again, like I said, were made for war.
There's that quote that I'm thinking of right now that is, if you stand for nothing, what will you die for? So is there ever a time where it is appropriate to wage war?
100%. I think that when there's injustice, I think you should fight for it. I think there are convictions that you may hold that I think you should fight for. When we see things that are like wrongdoing, so for example, like when we are talking about the idea of like sex slavery and people, more human slaves are around right now than in the history of our world. And a lot of them are young women being trafficked across the world. 100%, that is worth waging war. That's worth being divisive over. There's no such thing as like, oh, that's kind of good. No. That's wrong. I think there are things in the world that are wrong, and you should stand up for those things. Now, again, that goes to a whole deeper conversation of where do we determine right and wrong, and our whole conversation. That may be for another pod, but I think there are things that you should stand and you should fight for. There are some convictions that you should stand up and you should, when I say wage war, willing to stand your ground on. But most of the stuff that we're waging war on or that we're being divisive about is just because we think our way is the best way.
Okay, so on that topic, a little bit of moral code. Do you think that things that most people agree with right now are wrong is going to get more and more extreme? For example, you just gave the example of like sex trafficking. Do you think that at some point people will think that that's okay?
Here's what I would say. I don't know about sex like trafficking. Here's what I will tell you. I think with where the moral fabric of our country is going, I think in years to come, probably before I die, I think that if a 30-year-old man and a 12-year-old girl both mutually agree that they think that they want to be in a relationship, I think that's going to be fine. I think that's going to be legal in our country. Because, and I know that sounds, well, no, it's not, because we know that's just wrong. Well, who says it's wrong? Because there are things now that we say that are not wrong that at one point in time were wrong. And I think what ends up happening is as a people, we go down a slippery slope right now with trying to define, because everybody says there's no absolute truth. Well, if there's no absolute truth, then who is going to define that? So listen, for me, if I get out of my car, so who's to say that's not okay it's wrong for me to get out of my car if you cut me off and slap the fire out of you, right? Like, well, yeah, you get arrested. Okay, well, here's the thing. It's like, that's my truth. My truth is this. You cut me off, you get slapped. Like that, you know what I'm saying? But and again, everybody's like, well, that's crazy. You're going to, it says you. But there's certain things that I think that are just absolutely insane that we've gone to now. And because we've gone to these places, it's the fact of where there's no boundaries and there's nothing. And I think we're going to get to some of these places now that they'll get a lot worse.
It's so interesting because in this current cultural moment, there's a huge push for diversity and authenticity. And people really want that, except when everyone's diversity and authenticity doesn't look like how they would define it.
Yes.
So would you say that you've ever been in relationships with people that you disagree with?
Oh, a lot of my friendships are with people who, I'll give a great example. One of my best friends is a Republican state senator. And and here's the thing, me and him, man, we are the best of friends. We go on vacation together. We do stuff like that. There's things that he believes that I don't believe. And it's not because I'm here on the pod saying, I'm a Republican, Democrat, whatever. If you want to know where I really land, I really have no political affiliation right now because I think they're both psychos. But that being said, I have a lot of friends who I disagree with on things. But what we do is, it's finding room. We make room. We major on the majors. As one of my good friends, Seth Sherman, talks about, is this. There are certain things to divide for. There's certain truths, like certain things in my life where I'm going to divide for. So here's an example. I've mentioned this before. Like my faith in Jesus is a huge thing for me. So if you don't like me and say I can't be, if you're going to remain a Jesus follower, I can't be your friend, I'll divide for that. I'm not dividing if we don't have the same kind of views, political views. I've got friends of mine who have views of abortion that I don't. We're not dividing over that. We're still friends. And so my point in that, I think that, yeah, I have people that that I disagree with, but you're 100% right, Bree, that in today's world, man, people either want diversity of skin color. So I'll just say it. Democrats want diversity of skin color, diversity of gender and sexual ethics things, but they want the same thought process.
That's a good way to put it.
They want the same thought. You want diversity of all this other stuff, but not diversity of thought. I think when you look on the Republican side of it, they'll say they're fine with diversity of people, but when you look at it, you're like, yeah, fam, ain't a whole lot of other people. I mean, again, it's growing, but it's not. But I think they're like, hey, have free thought, whatever. As long as it doesn't, it's a whole kind of, hey, they're willing to say, hey, have free thought about this. And I say that at some level because they're kind of the same way. Hey, if you don't think about capitalism this way or government this way or taxes this way, if you don't think about, gender this way, whatever, then they have issues with you. So I think a lot of times we want diversity of skin color and things like that. We just don't want diversity of thought. And so that's kind of where we're landing right now.
It seems like there are more people than I think should do this that would cut somebody off because they don't have the same political views as them.
Mm-hmm.
Why should they not do that?
Because you don't grow as a person. Like, our country is filled with a bunch of emotionally immature people. There's a lot of people who even lead our country who I don't think emotionally develop past 18. Like, you just don't grow unless you're having resistance. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. You go to work out. Why? It's resistance that's there. Yeah. Resistance leads to growth. So if you're just around people who think that we should all go boycott because Donald Trump may get arrested, and we all think that the government is all conspiring against him and all this and election fraud, or if you think that, hey, I'm cutting you off because you know what, you think there should be some type of you think there should be a little stricter policies on borders and things like that, and that means you hate immigrants. Like, if you're around like people like that all the time, like, you're just gonna stay the same. It's good. Debate ideas, get around growing ideas. Like, because sometimes your ideas that you have, listen, I had ideas at 20 that I have now at 44 that were dumb, like stupid, that I'm like, yeah, that don't even work. And it's happening more in our world today where we're coming up with ideology so fast. Like, things are happening so quick that it used to take years. I'm talking about years, sometimes even a century, to develop a thought and idea. Now they're coming up with like, oh, some like moron tweeted it out. And they tweeted out that sounds good, man. That should be an ideology now. And we're just doing it. And what we're having people who don't critically think, who aren't emotionally intelligent. And what that leads to harm to people.
Why do you think that people think that extremely?
Anxiety. And what I mean by anxiety, I said it before, I'm not talking about anxiety disorder. I'm talking about that fear, that thing that's in you about a fear of the future, like fear of your future, like death in your future. And what I mean by death, like the idea that you would say that, man, think about this. Everyone said that if Joe Biden, there's so many people saying this, Joe Biden gets elected, we're going to turn into a communist nation. People were saying, Donald Trump's president, we're going to turn into like Russia, with oligarchs, and he'll be the one ruling, and no one will have a voice, blah, blah, blah. We're still a capitalistic society, democratic society. So people go there because their anxiety pushes them to black and white thinking. It pushes them to like, there's no in between, there's no nuance. And so when you live there, then you live like, man, my side's the best side, and my side's the right side, and my side's the right side. Anybody who's against that means you're against whatever. So that's why we have people talking now about people who you serve in government, and you may be on the left. And people will say, you're against America. You're like, some of these people are civil servants. Like, some of these people are really giving their time to serve. Now, again, I know there's Democrats and Republicans who are out there right now who go and they're making a whole lot of money. They actually got way more wealthier now being that. But I'm talking about people, some people are just really good servants, and you're saying you're anti-American because they don't have your ideals. And I think, and it happens on both sides of the aisle. I see so many, I saw friends, people leave their relationships. Again, as leading a church, I see people leave because like of certain things without ever having a conversation. And so you live in fear, you live in these extremes. And now our culture is, as we've learned, I've talked about before, we live in systems that are built on anxiety. And so now this built on anxiety, that's the system. And so what do people do? From media, politicians, to us individually, companies, we just now market anxiety. because that's where people want to live. And so that's where we live, in these crazy places.
Have you ever cut somebody off before?
Have I ever cut somebody off? That's a great question. I've never, I can recall right now thinking, cut somebody off, but I've put boundaries up because what they were doing was more harmful. And I had to put boundaries up because I had to put boundaries up for myself too, because sometimes, you know, I think I can fix everything. And so it's more like in that, but I've never really cut somebody off to where I'm like, man, hey, they had this different thought, blah, blah, blah. Normally what it's been is people cutting me off. That's one of the hard things I will tell people a lot of is that, as running a business and being an entrepreneur, but also being an entrepreneur in a faith space of a church, let me tell you this, that's probably the hardest thing. The hardest thing I would tell you is that there are people who you do life with, you invest in, you see their kids raised, man, you help them through difficult times, you give them money, you do the whole thing, and in a drop of a dime, they may not like one idea or one thought, they don't come talk to you and they leave. And I'm telling you, it's a really hard thing. That's why when you actually look at it, a lot of pastors who've led and planted and grown churches, when they do brain scans of them, a lot of them have PTSD. It looks, I mean, they literally have the brain images of that of a war vet because of all the micro losses that take place. And so that's been one of the things, man, I've had to walk through a ton. I mean, 2020, I had to walk through that a lot. I mean, I'm a black man in the South with a church that's multi-ethnic with all different types of political views. And, man, you know how many people just at times had issues with me because I said, hey, even talking about Ahmaud Arbery, saying, hey, it's wrong what happened. Oh, you don't know what happened. I'm like, yeah, I do. I saw somebody get shot. Or George Floyd, wait till the evidence comes out. What evidence? I saw 8 minutes. 8 minutes of a man in perfect 8K get choked out and die. I'm like, I don't need evidence. And then taking stances just to say, no, Black lives do matter. And I wasn't identifying. And then people, you're identifying with that Marxist organization. I'm like, did I say that? I'm just saying Black Lives Matter. I wouldn't have to say it if it really was. But then people just take you to extremes. And so for me, I can't live in their extremes. They just go ahead. Because remember, anxiety starts trying to make you an expert of me. You try to make you an expert of me. And so what you need to do is actually become an expert of self. Because when you become an expert of self, you actually begin to understand and empathy can flow and stuff like that. But that's kind of, most times it's people walking away kind of from me with some of the issues that they have.
Do those situations ever make you want to change your boundaries, or do they ever make you feel lonely?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, here's the hard part. I didn't always grow up being like a Jesus follower. So there's still part of my old nature that's still there that God's still working through. But like for some people, man, the way they can talk and say stuff, I'm like, like if you really want to, like, we can't, like, you know what I'm saying? Listen, like, it could be, we could take it out. I mean, however you want to handle this, we can handle it a whole different way if you want. No, I can't do that. Those are times I wish I could do that, but I can't do that. So it makes it hard because here's what you have to do. As a matter of fact, I was on the phone with my friend before this podcast, and we talked about he's a fellow pastor, and he made a great point. He said, one of the hardest things about, and again, I think, I shouldn't say just this is for any leader, the stuff you have to swallow as a leader. Because people have expectations of you, but they feel some type of way if you ever put expectations on them. And that's not a healthy relationship. It's not a healthy relationship is this. You have expectations for me, I have them for you. And I should be able to voice my expectations. But as a leader, many times, people don't want to do that. They want to ultimately go. They want you to have you meet my expectations, but if you have expectations of me, that's wrong. They'll say, as a leader, you're using your power and authority to do stuff. And you're like, no, well, then that's not a relationship.
Yeah. What do you usually feel like they're trying to take from you?
They want me to fulfill something that someone in their past never fulfilled for them.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, if you have authority and power, people sometimes feel important that if you're spending time with them or if you are investing as well, no, I got to meet with the vice president, or I got to meet with the senior vice president. No, I need to meet, I can't meet with, man, you're just a lawyer to your manager. No, I can't meet with you. Because why? Because, you have to fulfill something in me. Because I feel some type of way when I'm around powerful people. Or, man, you know what? My family, my father neglected me or my mother neglected me. So now if you're in this place, your job now is to it's to not neglect me. You're to fulfill the wound of what's happening. And most people never deal with their wounds. They never get themselves well and healthy. And so what they do is they look to people. And then they wonder why they're always by themselves and lonely. They don't have friends or people who want to actually lead them. It's because they bleed out on people. And then when you try to help them, hey, I'm just trying to get you to stop bleeding everywhere. You're bleeding on me. It's like a freaking Tarantino movie. You got blood splattering in my face emotionally. I'm trying to get you to stop bleeding right now. But then it's like, whoa, you're harming me by doing that. And so it's just one of those situations where I think they just want you to fulfill stuff that someone else didn't fulfill in their lives. And there's the other thing too. We talked about this. People just think about themselves a lot.
Yeah.
We love I would say, you want to know how much people love themselves? I'll tell you this. Go to an event. You want to get your Instagram, your Facebook, your TikTok channel. Just go take a bunch of pictures of an event of people and tag them. You know how that'll grow because we love ourselves. And so that's what I'm saying. I think sometimes people are just kind of selfish in that. And again, it's kind of how it goes.
I know that you believe that leaders are supposed to care for the people who are following them. Mm-hmm. At what point does it start to hit that line to where those individuals might be expecting you to be something or fulfill something that you're not even supposed to do for them?
Yeah, and I think that it's a great question. That's why, going back to kind of our original thought about Made for War, leaders have to look within, because many times as leaders, we've been told this, man, leaders, Simon Sinek, which I love Simon Sinek, leaders eat last, right? Man, a leader, man, you're the first one in, last one to leave. Leaders lay down and sacrifice, all the stuff. But what that can do, if you aren't being an expert of self, many times what looks like leadership is actually just self-worship. Yeah. You actually lay down your life because you want people to like you. You want people to be connected to you. You don't feel that you're good enough. So I'm going to do all these things that look like leadership so that you will say, oh, man, he's that, and you'll be committed to me. My thing was this for a while was the fact of that I never thought that I was a good enough leader. So because I didn't think I was a good enough leader, what I needed people to do, I would be the one who would sacrifice, because I realized I thought my sacrifice would be the only reason why you want to be around me, because I'm not talented enough or good enough. Like I mentioned before, I think I'm average. So because I'm average, that means, well, I got to do something to make you want to stay around and actually help me and do this. So let me do this instead of it being out of a real place of authenticity. And now over the years, I've kind of grown into that to where, yeah, the stuff I do for the most part, now there's still moments that can pop up, but for the most part, I lead and sacrifice and do those things from a place of, because it's just the thing I want to do, and it is the right thing to do, but not to get anything from the people that I'm actually serving.
To you, what does it look like when you overextend yourself?
Yeah. When I overextend myself, I care way too much about something. It becomes very obsessive in my mind to where a person's decision or what they're doing, it becomes to where it's like life or death for me, where I'm sitting, I can't sleep. I'm thinking about it. I'm talking about it to multiple people because my anxiety is high. So when I talk, it gets the anxiety out. It's when I overstep and start trying to no, they got to fix, they do this, their whole life's going to be ruined. I got to help them. I got to do this. No, man, they're just not thinking straight. Maybe if I talk to them again, that's another one where I end up having the same conversation with people about this issue, because I feel like my voice, because I use it, because communication is a gift. If I can just keep talking to you, then it's going to fix it. If I keep talking to you, then you're going to eventually get it. When I start doing that, then I know I have really stepped over the line, and I'm becoming way more obsessive than I actually need to be. And I'm taking responsibility for stuff that's not mine.
Is there ever something that you experienced that made you believe that messaging, that you had to do that?
Yeah. Growing up, I always felt like, because of certain dynamics in my home, I feel like I had to keep things together. I felt like I had to be the one who did the right thing, had to make sure I was trying my best to be what I needed to be for my mom. tried to not be too much of my dad, tried to make up for some lacks that sometimes, in my brother, I would just always feel that. So now it just built me to realize like, oh no, I'm responsible for this. And so that was kind of it. So you just realize, no, I'm responsible for my mother emotionally. I'm responsible for not being too much emotionally for my father. I'm responsible for being more, some of there's some thoughts around my brother that where it was, hey, I need to be more of an achiever in people's eyes in order to whatever, and that was what I made up too, to quote unquote make up for stuff with him.
Yeah. I know that in the moments whenever you set those boundaries, the messaging can seem like you don't care. Mm-hmm. And so I want to emphasize that I know that that's not true. That you are someone who deeply, deeply cares about people. And so when you are doing levels of introspection with yourself in those moments and you are caring for somebody, how inside do you start to talk yourself through when you start to hit the lines between genuine care for someone versus trying to fix?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think the first thing that I think you have to know yourself. Here's where I go to. When I get to a point of like, I can go two ways. When I get to a point to where like, I don't want to deal with you anymore, and I'm still supposed to kind of like, I think I need to be healthy and involved, I go to like indifference. I could care less what happens. So knowing myself, when I feel indifference, I lean in a little bit more. When I'm starting to feel myself constantly thinking about a situation, when I constantly find myself having them arguments in my head or like, this is really what I want to say. And there's this, and then all of a sudden 5-10 minutes go by, you've had all this imaginary arguments in your head. And then you get out of that trance you're in, and literally your heart rate has gone from like a resting of 80 to like, you're freaking on like a Stairmaster. It's so high. That's when I'm like, oh, okay, this is becoming a little bit unhealthy for me. Mm-hmm. I think you have to just know. It's like constantly walking and kind of knowing how, like, knowing your natural disposition. Some people are more codependent. So you know what? It's, as our good friend Dr. Zoda says, it's like this, like wisdom is the road. You know what I'm saying? Wisdom is the road between. And a lot of times we go to a ditch. Yeah. So if you're in the ditch of codependency, then like sometimes it's going to feel real weird if you start leaning the other way of like, man, I'm going to start putting up boundaries. Yeah. Because you're going to feel like, I don't feel like I'm caring. If you are someone who naturally like, you're more like hardwired, like you're not codependent. It's more of like, you're more like kind of, I'm going to say narcissistic, but like more like selfishly thinking. When you start leaning into somebody, you're going to feel like, man, this is weird. Am I overly caring? Like, no, you normally don't do that. Keep going. You're not even close there yet. So I think it's really important. And I think over years of doing so much introspection and work, I kind of know myself. And I think that's where we always say you have to dig in and you have to become self-aware. You have to know your triggers. You have to know, you have to be honest with yourself to know where you go. Because if you do, then it's going to help. And in those moments, and the more work you do, the more you can realize, oh, you know that feeling. And then you kind of have like, that's how it is for me now. I know a feeling, and then I've worked through it so much. A lot of times I know the feeling, and then it's like, all right, it's either this or this. It's here. Okay, boom. It's A, Brett. All right, then you go through door A. All right, it's A or B. It's B. Then you go through door B, and then by the end you get to your solution kind of that way. But that just takes time. I mean, it takes time, and it's work. And that's why I tell people to be a really good leader and to really lead, and I shouldn't say be a good leader, just to be a good, healthy human, it's just a lot of work, but I don't think we do that type of work. I think we just feel sometimes, I think we feel ways all the time, and we never dive into, like, we never get underneath why.
Yeah. To do that work, it's very lonely.
Yep.
It's a very lonely journey, and especially if you're a leader, you really don't have many people who you can talk about that process with. Mm-hmm. What do you do with that? How do you manage those feelings?
Yeah, and I think that for those listening that no matter where, I always tell people, and I want to be clear, this pod is for every person. And so you may be out there, and I think at some point I always say you're going to be leading someone.
Yeah, everyone's a leader.
Everyone's a leader. You know what I'm saying? Like you may be in the room by yourself. Well, then at that point, you're the most powerful person in the room, right? I think if you're a mom and you got kids to whatever. So this idea of leadership, we're more talking about, it is really how to be a healthier leader, but also how just to be a healthier human. And so when it does feel lonely, here's what I would tell you. I think one, depending on like practices. So if you're not spiritual or whatever, but if you are, prayer is a huge thing. It's one way that I always tell, man, prayer is a huge thing for me, because it's one way and when I mean by prayer is a lot of times I go and I'm able to dump the box to God. I'm very honest, like, I mean, the raw, uncut feelings. And then I pray for very specific things I'm really hoping for, even to change within me. And if it's meditation or something like that, I think those are all good things to kind of jumpstart you as far as getting those things, so you can't really maybe go to a bunch of people. But I will tell you, you do need one person or two people. And here's what I would say. If you can find those people, just tell them, like, hey, just ask them, do you mind being this person for me? And in these moments, here's the thing. I just need to get this off my chest. I don't need you to fix it. I don't need you to fix. I just need you to just, like, can I just come say it to you? And is that okay? Mm-hmm. And if I need you to fix it, I'll say, hey, will you help me? But just be honest with somebody up front. And I think you probably have a friend or two or three who you can actually go to and who are willing to actually listen. I've been very fortunate. I have a few people in my life who I can actually go to and dump the box, and they're really good. And what, for the most part, what they do is that they'll sit in them. You know, I heard it. Simon Sinek said recently on a Diary of CEO podcast, where he says, "Man, sometimes you want people to sit in the mud with you." And I've got friends who actually will. You know, when you're going through that stuff and you're dumping the box, they'll just sit in the mud with you. They're not trying to fix you. They're just in there with you. Because sometimes that's what you want. You just want somebody to be there with you. You want them to be there with you. And then, you know, the more aware you get, you can ask them, hey, man, do you mind helping me? What do you think? And I recently had that. You know, somebody listened to the pod. Shout out to my guy, Michael Fly, coach at Missouri. That's my man. And Fly is one of my guys, and he's one of the dudes who sits in the mud with me. This was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And what meant a lot to me, he was in the heart of the NCAA tournament, SEC tournament, and I was going through some stuff. And man, my man called me, and man, I got off my chest what I was feeling, and then we had to get off the phone because he had to go somewhere. And then he called me back, and man, he gave me, and he actually was like, hey, you know, do you want me to listen some more, or can I, you know? So I was like, no, for sure. And he said some stuff, man, that really, I mean, it was super impactful for me. I mean, it really helped me. And so, I mean, you got to have people around you like that.
Mm-hmm. Why do you feel like people are so afraid of tough love?
I think they're afraid of tough love because I think they think tough love is this indictment on them as a person. So if someone says something tough to you, then it's like, oh, you're right. Or it's either, you know, you hear me say it, you know, I've said it this way. When you get correction, you know, there's 3 ways to respond. The alligator, where it's the fact of where you think about alligator skin, it's tough. You reject, you become the person. Somebody tries to correct you, you're fighting against it. Or you become the samurai, where you know, samurai, they want to die on their sword. So you're like, you're right, I'm the way. You know, you say, hey, you know, you may tell me, hey, Adrian, man, like that shirt, you know, there's a little stain. I knew it. You're right, Bree. I always wear the worst stuff ever. I'm the worst human ever. I never dress well. I might as well just die. And you're like, whoa. I just said there's a little stain, right? Yep. And then the other one, but I think it's the patient. If you think about a patient is someone who has something, and when there's a surgical patient lays on the operating table and they get cut just enough to fix the problem. And I think most people aren't willing to be the patient. Most people have never been in that environment. That's one thing I know me and you talked about a ton, and is the fact that, like, being a former, you know, like competitive high-level athletes, that, man, you were just born into that. Like, your whole world was getting freaking critical feedback, if you like it or not. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so it's like you just are born, like, yeah, like, I don't even know. I feel weird when I don't get that type of feedback. Now, some of that stuff is unhealthy, but I feel weird if I don't get, like, feedback, because my whole life was trained in that. You know what I'm saying? I would ask you that question. You know, somebody who was born in that world and had tons of just feedback, like, and especially, you know, because people talk about your generation. They say your generation, snowflakes, they're soft, they don't like da-da-da, whatever. But, like, how is it that you're able to, like, to really take feedback? Because you really do. Like, you take feedback really well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely have my moments still, that's for sure. One of the things that comes to my mind immediately is I think that you will give grace to other people the level of grace that you give yourself. It really comes down to learning that a lot of feedback that you get, it's not personal. And it can feel very, very personal. Yeah. It can feel like people are taking literal shots at you with a gun to your heart. When you receive feedback about the things that you do or the things that you think or the things that you feel. Yeah. And the more comfortable you get with making mistakes, the less anxiety you will have around receiving feedback, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's good. And I think the thing, you talk about it like, and that's hard because you said, hey, it's not personal.
Yeah.
But at some of it is. I understand what you're saying. It's not like, hey, I can't stand you, so I'm going to just pick every little thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you mean by it's not personal. They're not trying to attack you, but
Right.
it is personal because you're like, it's about,
It's about who you are,
it's about
yeah.
who you are. Like, oh, I didn't do this thing. And so I think separating that when someone's giving you feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and I also know too, yeah, you know what? Sometimes I've had people give me feedback to where you're just doing this to air me out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we'll then do is go to extremes. Okay, see, that's why I can't get feedback from anybody, because this one time when I was in the 3rd grade and my teacher was angry
Mm-hmm.
at me, and I'm like, okay, like, great. But that's not everybody, you know? And I think it's important. I don't think
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you grow in life without actually getting like real constructive feedback and here's the other thing, and the willingness to want that.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, too, there's tiers to the level of weight you take criticism from people.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you are like the highest tier in my life. So you know me really well, and I can really trust you. And depending on how well you know me and how much I trust you is going to put you higher or lower on that tier. And I think the higher the tier, the more willing you have to say, yeah, you're making a comment about something about who I am,
Yep.
but I trust you so much, and I know that you're looking out for me and my best interest. So I can fully be myself around you, and
Yep.
I can fully take in this feedback because of how much I know that you care about me.
Let me ask you this question. What about for somebody who you've had to take feedback from, who is maybe not someone who knows you, but they are an authority, like whether if it's at work, it's a manager, or if it's, hey, at one point in time it was a coach or someone. How do you receive that feedback, even though they may not know you? Because that's one thing that's said a lot, like that
Right.
I've heard from people.
Like,
well,
you don't know me.
You don't really know me, so you can't do that. I'm
Yeah.
like, but like, dog, like, if it's one of those situations in your job, like that, that.
Well, I don't need you to know me to tell you to write. You need to write a better paragraph. You need
Yes,
to work on
okay.
your vocabulary.
Yeah.
You don't need to know me to tell me that.
No, and that's super important because I'm telling you, we see that a lot where people will have those types of conversations where they're like, where I've done that, where I went to go correct someone, and it's like I'm watching their behavior. I've done this for a long time, and they've said that to me. Well, I mean, you really don't really know me, and I'm like, and I'm gonna just say this. It's because everyone thinks they're so special. Everyone thinks, listen, you are your unique snowflake, but also you are frozen water. A snowflake is all very unique, but you're still frozen water. As my man, Coach CY says, most human beings, we regular. And when you think you're extraordinary or everyone's so special, then it's this. Then it's like, you have to know me. And what I mean by that is that most human beings, we're all like, I just have done stuff so long in life that it's you did boom, boom, boom. Here's probably the 3 scenarios that are going to probably happen when you do these 3 things. So me saying this is not me just saying, oh my God, I have to know you. No, you're not that special that you're going to be some anomaly to what I've seen over 20 years. Now, is there anomalies? Yes, there are anomalies. But I know a lot of times I'm talking to these people, I know you. You ain't an anomaly. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think that's really important for people to understand, because in today, especially for your generation, that's a really hard thing, because it's like, you have to know me intimately to really help me. And I'm like, no, they don't. If they've actually, especially when it comes to work, if you see somebody who's had success and they're doing stuff and they step in and try to give you that, man, let me tell you this, that is a huge thing. I can't tell you how many times I've had that in my life where someone who I really didn't know, that they saw something and they corrected. Matter of fact, when I'll give a quick story. I'm doing broadcasting and doing the radio. There's a guy who I know. I mean, we know each other, but we're not like super close. And man, I was in the middle of doing my broadcast on ESPN, and he texted me, and he was like, "Hey, I'm listening to you, man. It's great, blah blah." But this dude is a seasoned radio voice and broadcaster, and here's what he says: "Hey, you have this. This is your crutch word. You've said it now this many times. Will you make sure?" He's like, "I just wanted you to know that, blah blah blah, man. Keep doing a great job." Now, I could have said in that moment, "Man, this dude should have gave me. I can't believe he's doing this, man. I ain't even asking for this." But I was like, "Yo, this dude's really good. And he even had just the heart to even send that to me. I was super thankful. I could have taken that personal, but I was like, this dude's really good. Let me learn. And he was right about what he said.
Right.
And so I think it's super important for us to be able to, what you said, Bree, have the toughness and the ability to hear real important feedback.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to know your values.
Yeah.
And if you don't know them yet, just use criticism as a moment to be curious about how it's hitting you and whether it might be hitting something that is a value of yours.
Yeah.
Because if it's not that, if it's something like talking about your speaking crutch,
Yep.
it's like, well, that's not really violating a value of yours.
Yeah,
So
that's really good.
if you are starting to feel really anxious and really defensive in that moment, that's one of those moments that you should flag in your head and say, oh, I should really think about why this might be making me anxious. Maybe a lot of people had made comments about this, or maybe I'm feeling like I'm not doing my best within this space. So then him saying that just kind of proved to me that I'm not enough to be talking on this mic, all of that kind of stuff. Like those are the moments where you then should ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Because if it's not hitting a major value of yours, then just think about it. And if it is, that's when you really have to consider that's those moments to me in my head where it's like, oh, there might be a necessary divisiveness in this moment because it's hitting a major value of mine, and I'm going to have to say, no, I'm not going to take that, and I'm going to walk away from this situation.
That's great, because also when that moment hits you, what it sometimes will test, is it actually really a value?
Exactly.
Because so many times I think in today's world, I don't think human beings, I think we may, core values, right? I think you may have 5, maybe 7, but I think it's probably around 5. Sometimes this is my core values. This is personally for me. And I think so many times we want to have values for everything. And this is a value of mine. Well, listen, it's a value when it costs you something. Now, oh man, this is so much a value, I'm willing to turn down $50,000. No, I don't care about it that much, right? I think you can tell those things. And I think in moments when people push against you, I think you should always say, man, is this really a value of mine? Why do I hold this? Why do I have this value? Is this value because it's a core part of me? Or did I create this value to protect me from some pain or some stuff that's inside that I saw growing up, right? I saw growing up these things. And so now I've created this a value of mine because of the pain it actually caused me versus being something that really does matter to me.
Yeah, and I think that most people will respect that.
Yeah.
Even if they disagree with you, most adults will say, you know what, I can respect that you're going to stand for that. Because even when you look in culture and you think about the people that we're drawn to, it's the people who know who they are and know what they stand by, and they don't wager from that.
Yeah.
For example, take an Elon Musk.
Yep.
There might be a lot of things that you disagree with him on, but you can respect the fact that he is saying, here are the things that I'm about, here's what I'm trying to do, and I'm not gonna derail from that, even if you disagree.
That is so good. And again, using Elon, kind of even going back to the beginning of our conversation, because this is the beauty of the pod, is that, man, we were talking about the idea of that human were meant to wage war, but as these things happen, it started going to an idea of interpersonal leadership, all those types of things, and kind of as we kind of come to a close, thinking about Elon, he's a prime example of this, where people want to wage war against him because of some of his views that he has and how he handled Twitter, whatever. And here's the thing, that is completely fine. But here's what you do. Now there's people trying to diminish the genius. Oh, I'm like, listen.
Same with Kanye.
Yes, that's the thing. You can disagree, and I listen, and you should.
Especially when they do something that's unjust.
100%. Elon has not handled things well. I think he has gotten way out of again, that's the part with the creative genius. They think they're geniuses in every place and everything. So I think that, but my point with him though, but it's like, man, but then you start diminishing our Tesla's really that good. Those rockets, really, did he do that? I don't know how great.
No,
you're like, dude,
they're good. He's smart.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, dude, listen, you can say whatever you want to say about my man, but look, he challenged the banking industry with PayPal. No one had challenged the automotive industry. Let me tell you this. Now, everybody doing? Every commercial you see is about EVs, right? The third thing is this. Space, literally was NASA. My man is out there launching rockets for a third of the cost. I'm like, yo, you got to give him his flowers for that and still disagree with stuff like this when he acts like he's 5 years old on Twitter. I get that. Or Kanye. I can separate that. And that's another thing. It pisses me off today that, listen, you can separate what people like the work and the art. I'm not going to take away. Kanye's a freaking genius. Like what he's created musically and the things he's made. Listen, like it or not, let me tell you this. Adidas, yeah, they figured it out. Oh, whatever. Until you know what? You lost about, $7 billion. Let's see how much you really hold the values that you hold.
And by the way, they did it when it was hot in culture, and then when things died down, they went right back to the
now it's back
deal.
down, $7 billion down. Oh, Kanye, we back up. You know what I'm saying?
Like when nobody's listening anymore, we're going to circle back on this.
That's where I think that with people, that's when I say this idea of like waging war, where we're human beings. We want to put people, we just want to go to war. And then here's what happened. Then we want to turn on these other people versus living in nuance, man. Like, listen, you have to learn to make peace. You have to learn to live in nuance. The world is not, majority of the world is not black and white. I tell people all the time, and even the historical book, the book that has been around, the Bible, God gave people 10 commandments, not 10 million. Because what he knew is this: the world is it's nuanced. There's a lot of nuance in life, and the way you learn that, you have to just be. And again, and some of the stuff we actually talked about, even though we didn't say again about making war. A lot of stuff we talked about introspection today, and going in, and how that makes you feel as a leader, and all of that, and what people try to take from you. All that helps you find within the idea that, because listen, if you don't have peace within, you cannot produce peace in the world. And so most of the time, think about it. When you think about your thoughts, many times it's war raging in you. And so what do you produce? War. So you have to understand what is going on inside of you in order for you to deliver peace. You can never export what you do not have. And so that's the point. Human beings can be people of peace, but we have to learn peace. And we have to unlearn the reality of how we make war. Well, Bree, that was a lot of fun today. That was a lot of fun today. And so, guys, listen, I hope that you are enjoying the pod. And listen, here's what I want you to do. That as you listen, as you hear this, man, share this to people who you think out, but also for you. Go write down. How do you feel? Do you have people you can go to? Make actionable steps. There's something that has been said there. When you listen to this pod, it's not so much about, man, there may be little things that I say or Bree says that I want to write this down. But here's what I want you to do. Real, like, active listeners, it shouldn't be so much about what we're saying, but when we say something, what is it saying to you? That's the stuff you write down. That's the stuff you get actionable on. A lot of times we'll go to a place where we'll listen to a podcast like, oh, man, this person said this. And you'll like remember that or write that down. And that's important. But also what's important to say, but why? Why did that statement? Why did this thing like that really stood out to you? Why did it stand out to you? Because that's where the real stuff is. And so I want to encourage you, go write that stuff down, make action. Because when you make action, what is leading to is this: the point of this podcast. The point of this podcast is to help people write new rules. And we believe new rules is it all comes from this idea of authenticity, self-awareness, resilience, and remain self-aware. When human beings are authentic, the word humans begin to flourish more. And that's what we're all about here in our New Rules community. We want to see humanity flourish. And so until next time, keep writing new rules.